Welcome to Around the Horn in Wholesale Distribution with Kevin Brown and Tom Burton. Sponsored each week by LeadSmart Technologies, Tom, Kevin, and their guests review the news of the week and dive deep into the topics impacting manufacturers, wholesale distribution, independent sales agents, and the global wholesale supply chain. Whether it's M&A, SaaS and cloud computing, B2B e-commerce, or supply chain issues, we peel back the onion with our guests into the topics that impact your business the most.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
It's bright and early here. You have me sitting in the dark.
Yeah, well, you know what? You were up anyways, so it's good. Scott, you're in Kansas,
Louis.
right?
No, I'm in St. Louis, Missouri.
Louis.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for having me back. I really appreciate coming on.
No, it's fantastic to have you. I am in Boulder, Colorado, so we're hitting at a conference. So we're hitting 3 time zones today, and getting together. Scott, you're joining us kind of last minute. You were a great guest when we had you in the past. Very appreciative of you being with us in this setting, and we brought you in because you had done some great work yesterday, getting some good feedback on some labor issues and the dockworkers strike. So we're going to chat about that a little bit. Why don't I really quickly do our little bit of housekeeping work, because we're a little short on time today. We're starting early. We're going to cut things a little bit short, but we didn't want to miss the show. So we're doing it kind of remotely here today. But I'm Kevin Brown here, as I am almost every week, with my lifelong friend and co-founder of LeadSmart Technologies, Tom Burton. Tom and I work together at LeadSmart. LeadSmart is a AI-enabled customer intelligence and CRM solution that brings new and innovative insights into distribution and manufacturing businesses to gain greater insight on customer intelligence, sales teams, and overall business views to help accelerate growth within distribution and manufacturing. LeadSmart is a sponsor of our show, which is why we talk about them there, but we get together every single week when we can. I always joke and say, unless somebody's in the hospital on an airplane or stuck in the middle of a presentation or something, we get together. We have guests like Scott that join us that are industry leaders and thought leaders that can help us unpack the news of the week. And what we do on our show is we review a newsletter that we publish each week. It's called Around the Horn in Wholesale Distribution and Manufacturing. It goes out to about 10,000 people each week. If you don't get that, we'd be happy to send that to you. You can send us an email at hello@leadsmarttech.com, and we will send that out to you. And you can also go directly to the website for the podcast, which is www.aroundthehornpod.com, and sign up there as well as looking at past episodes there. So we go live each week, as we said, on LinkedIn Live, YouTube Live, Facebook Live. Later in the day, John, our producer and editor, takes all that data, puts it together, and we'll be then on all of the popular podcast formats around the world. I think last week when I looked, we had been downloaded in over 60 countries. So kind of an exciting stat to start seeing. I didn't know that they were focused on listening to podcasts on wholesale distribution in Nepal, but we had downloads there. So we'll take them, right?
We'll take them.
Yep. Tom, did I miss anything there before we dive in?
Oh, let's do it. I want to say good morning to Bob and Paul. Scott, you have a fan already coming in. It's good to see we have people here, even though we changed the time and we're on so bright and early. I guess it's not so bright and early everywhere else, but just here.
No, just there, and you and anyone in Hawaii, I guess, and maybe a few other parts of the world. But Scott, before we dive in and talk about the news, let's talk about, Scott, your work with the Electrical Distributor magazine. Why don't you give us just a little bit of feedback on that, so the audience can know who you are and where these great insights you're going to have in a few minutes come from.
Sure. So we're the TED magazine is for the electrical distributor. The T is lowercase, ED is electrical distributor. We're the publication connected to the National Association of Electrical Distributors. The magazine's been in business for almost 60 years now. I've been with the magazine for almost 13 years. We've obviously changed radically over the time that I've been with the magazine. We've certainly ramped up our online coverage with tedmag.com and reporting daily news that happens today. We post today, like the dockworkers strike, which I know we're going to talk about here, but in addition to some other things. We started a second website July 1st called Electrified with the capital ED at the end of it, which focuses on electrification, which is the rewiring of the United States through, renewables and clean energy, which is a massive, massive undertaking, $1 trillion undertaking plus. And then we still do a publication, a magazine. It's digital only. We do 24 issues a year, not 12, not 6, twice a month, the 1st and the 15th. So we just came out with our issue a couple of days ago. It is all digital. It's free to anybody. Just go to tedmag.com. In the top corner, you see where it says current issue. You can click on that. You can check out what we're talking about. It's filled with best practices, strategies, things that are happening throughout the distribution community in electrical. So it's a great. We really enjoy working on the publication. We work in a great association filled with really top-notch thinkers, and pass that information along as best we can and as creatively as we can, obviously.
But Paul Kennedy guy's kind of involved there, right?
Paul Kennedy is the NAED chair for the next year and 8 months, I guess. And he provides a column every other month in the magazine, and I keep in close communication with him. He's one of our speakers at our regional conferences, so we talk about the content of that, and I help him. We do rehearsals the day before our meetings. We're almost in constant contact, Paul Kennedy and I. So it's great to have people. That's not a bad guy. Yeah, it's great to have people like him as a part of my life. I got to tell you, he's just a great guy, and I'm not just saying that because he's the chair. We've had a long relationship, and I always enjoy being around him. That's just the truth.
Very good. Well, I've got some time on the calendar scheduled with Paul in Chicago in a couple of weeks for a little social time and catching up and chatting biz. So we're looking forward to that. Well, let's kind of dive into the newsletter again. If you're listening on the recorded podcast later in the day or sometime in the future, you would not be seeing the newsletter that we're reviewing right now. And you can certainly reach out to us to get that. But we're going to start off by talking about the port shutdown that started on Tuesday this week, ended last night, or at least pushed pause, I guess is a better way to put our finger on that. So across the eastern U.S., from Maine down the East Coast, all the way across the Gulf Coast, was a shutdown of all of the ports. Large percentage of the goods and certain goods that come into the U.S. market come through there. A vast majority of produce and things like that come through those ports. So really big risk to the supply chain in general, but we'll kind of talk a little bit more about the wholesale distribution and kind of the markets that we all serve a little bit closer about that today. But Scott, the reason I reached out to you last minute yesterday, you've been a guest with us before, and we enjoyed having you and want to get you back for a full show. But you made a post yesterday on LinkedIn that caught my attention right away. And you reached out to your broad network on LinkedIn and asked for some good feedback. So, before we dive into some of the feedback, kind of our thoughts, the three of us, on what's been going on. And then we certainly welcome any comments that come across from those that are listening live this morning. Maybe any other thoughts, Scott, from you or Tom, about what I missed about the overview of the strike?
None for me. Tom, anything you want to throw out there? Go ahead.
No, I mean, it sounds like obviously the strike, got suspended last night. Scott, be interested in your take on this, as it relates to what you think may be happening here. So are they kicking the automation can down the road a bit? Is this a strategic move from the management side of things to maybe throw the bone over of some, a pretty substantial pay increase, but really the big issue about automation is, we're just avoiding that and maybe we can dodge it altogether. What do you think is happening here? I guess strategically, or is it just what it looks like?
Yeah, there's, I'm going to be as equal as I could possibly be. I'm not going to be a pro business side or the pro worker side on this one. There's certainly, like you said, there's two big things at play. One is, right. The union has reported, these companies are making record profits without, significant pay increases for the for the union members. So, I get that side. I'm not trying to say that I don't get that side. The flip side to that is, again, so they agreed on a 62% pay increase that is, pushed this strike back at least until January. The second part of it, like you were saying, Tom, is the automation side. And the fact of the matter is, if you're a business today and you're not embracing automation in some way, TED Magazine is going to be embracing automation in some way between now and 2040, 2035. And I'm sure that the same thing is going to happen at ports across the country, whether you're on the East Coast or the West Coast. So if you're going to be the last company, I'm not saying that you want to be the first, but if you're going to be the last company to embrace automation, you're going to have a hard time staying in business. And so this just kind of pushes that automation thing. It doesn't matter if it's ports or McDonald's or, companies that make shoes. I mean, automation, Amazon's, their warehouses are fully automated, for crying out loud. If we're not going to embrace this and accept this and figure out how to negotiate our contracts with automation being a part of it, it's really going to force some businesses into a tough situation. Maybe not today, but certainly in the very near future. And that's going to be an issue.
Well, I think you're right with all of that. And so to your point, Scott, right, the two critical issues were the union is saying zero additional automation, right? We're not doing this. And they wanted an 80% pay increase over the 6-year or whatever the contract was going to be, right? So now we're at 61.5. I've got CNBC on in the background here in my hotel room in Boulder. And 61.5% pay increase over 6 years. All right, that's settled, right? But now we've got this automation issue. And, Eric Hopland, with the CEO of the National Association of Wholesalers, has been, I think, 3 times in the last week on live TV talking about this topic. And this morning watching CNBC and reading some other things from Bloomberg and so forth. The reference point for this on the automation side is to Rotterdam. And the Port of Rotterdam is nearly fully automated now with very few employees in comparison needed. Safer environment, more efficient environment. Automation doesn't go on strike. Maybe it breaks occasionally. And to your point, look, I think there's a need for people there. I think it might just be a need for different jobs in that setting, right? We talk a lot about AI and other types of automation on an ongoing basis that are going to augment people. So maybe we don't need as many jobs there because of automation. But I think my big struggle with this, and we're going to get in and talk about some of the conversations we've had with industry folks and their feeling and preparations with supply chain with these things going on, is the issue for them is that unlike an automaker strike, I don't feel an impact from an automaker strike right away. A port strike, big input, right? 75% of bananas that come into the U.S. come into the Gulf Coast, right? Mm-hmm. When you look at that, these types of strikes this was a pretty aggressive position from the union, right? The words that were coming out of the union leader's mouth, who Bloomberg said this morning makes $1 million a year in salary, were pretty darn strong about crushing, the other side. And so for that, that's what I kind of struggle with from this standpoint is, look, I get it. You've got this group of workers that you're working to protect, but we also have the economy of this country that is going to be impacted by that. So that's where my struggles kind of lie.
Yeah, I think on you mentioned Rotterdam. It's adopting automation. You're not being an early adopter, right? It's not like you're the very first one to try it. So it's clear, I'm sure, with the ports that are automated, the value that they receive from those, both financially and overall, maybe on just the overall service and value to the customer. So to me, it's and interested in your take, Scott. To me, this automation is inevitable. And I think by giving them the, so to speak, the pay increase now, and then pushing the other issue down the road, I don't know. It seems to me it makes it a lot easier to potentially start introducing more and more automation over time, especially since, hey, I gave you the big bone of the pay piece. I just can't see how you can ignore that and just say, oh, we're not going to automate for 6 years.
Yeah.
Right. And an additional sort of angle to that is, I think, a lot of folks were talking about, during the strike, prices are going to go up because, like you said, we don't grow bananas here. We have to bring them in from other countries. So prices were going to go up, and there was a concern about that. Well, you know what? With a 61.5% pay increase over 6 years, prices are going to go up because, that company's going to pass along, their expenses. I mean, look at what the airlines did. They were reporting record profits for multiple quarters, and then the pilots and the flight attendants union started saying, well, you got to, they got similar 50% pay increases. And I travel, so I look at the price of plane tickets, and guess what? They're way up. So this, I'm sure, is just going to get passed along anyway. And as if you're going to take off your business hat and put on your consumer hat, the consumer is probably saying, okay, well, if prices of bananas are going to stay around 49 cents a pound, then you're going to have to automate. At the end of the day, most people are probably going to say, okay, I want my bananas to still be 49 cents a pound. So this is what it's going to take. And again, I don't want to stab the working man in the back by any stretch, because they do valuable work, and that's not the point that I'm trying to make. But I just don't know if I want to pay, 99 cents a pound for bananas without automation.
Yeah, well, I think that's the case. And then when you look at the magnitude of what comes into this country, I took a couple screenshots yesterday. I was just looking at my phone from CNBC, and this show is not about produce, but 82% of chili peppers, 90% of cherries that come into this country, right? And then we start talking about what we're going to get to here in a moment. Why we're here to talk about this today is what's the impact on an electrical distributor, pipe, valve, and fitting distributor, HVAC distributor, industrial safety, office products, whatever that might be. What are those? What is the implications of that? So we'll get to that momentarily. But I think we've got, this is a pretty big issue because, and there was a comment made a moment ago, about, there's got to be a huge political component to this. I won't claim I'm smart enough to really understand what's going on behind the scenes with those things. But you know what? There is one party that plays a lot more to organized labor or works to, and big election coming up. So never know. Never know about the timing.
If I'm fortunate enough to have my union contract expire, 35 days before a presidential election, and it's a major, supply chain contract, then why wouldn't I politicize it?
Yeah.
I guess that's just the way it is. Another part of this too, that I think we haven't touched on much. Again, we talk about bananas because we don't really grow them here.
Yep.
It's hard today to build manufacturing plants in the United States and avoid ports, just so we're clear. And again, I'll take the electrical side of it. Just everybody's talking about, hey,
sure,
you heard from both sides. Again, I'm not being political. You heard from the Republicans, you heard from the Democrats. We need to increase American manufacturing. It's hard to build factories today, just so we're clear. Again, just taking electrical, first of all, we're short electricians. Anybody will I was at the NECA conference last weekend, and every contractor that I talked to said we're way short on people. We have to turn down jobs that we would love to take because we don't have people to do the work. The flip side to that is, it doesn't matter anyway because we don't have switchgear. We can't turn the power on anyway because it's going to take 40-something months to get switchgear. So I don't have products to install anyway. So when you're talking about, hey, we need to fix American manufacturing, we're still probably 2 years away from, if we started today, we're still probably a couple of years away from just building the factories that are needed to make American products. So we don't have a resolution to importing key components or products that we need to be a functional society, basically, we don't have what it takes right now to build more factories. And that's a problem in terms of labor and products.
Yep. Well, Scott, let's dive in a little bit to what you heard yesterday. Of what you can share. You don't necessarily need to say the who unless it's appropriate, but you reached out to your network, and when we were messaging yesterday afternoon, you mentioned you had heard from manufacturers, distributors, and some manufacturers reps. My first question would be, and maybe you can weave this in to what you share a little bit with us, was similar sentiment between all three of those roles in the supply chain, manufacturers rep, and distributor?
Yes, very similar sentiment in terms of one, everybody wanted to work together in the supply chain. Whether if you were a manufacturer, you wanted to work with your distributor partners, or you wanted to work with your reps to make sure you were getting as much product going. If you're a distributor, you certainly were working very closely with your supply chain partners. So there was no doubt that there was a lot of increased communication effort to try and make sure that the most needed products were on hand and were going to be available over, what most of us just were saying was the short term, obviously, because nobody knew how long this strike was going to last. So there was quite a lot of effort on the manufacturer side, to get products into the country, whether they were going to literally shift coasts, which I couldn't imagine what the expense was on that, or load air. But I talked to ABB, they're fine with me talking about that. Loading products onto airplanes and flying it in instead of having it on ships. At least they're what they considered their key component parts. But there was definite opportunities for constant communication to make sure that you knew where everything stood in terms of at least key parts to keep job sites functioning.
Right. So any idea from your experience, and maybe others that might be listening could give us some feedback on that? I don't know what it does, but it's got to be significant. When you start putting electrical parts, which some are lightweight, but many aren't, onto aircraft, what does that add to your costs at that point in time?
Yeah, I would think that it's, cargo planes are big, but not big enough, obviously, to ship like ships do, obviously. So again, I'm just kind of looking at what ABB sent us, and they really, again, one of the things, they knew this was coming, so they were increasing inventory, trying to get as much product into the U.S. as they possibly could before last Tuesday. Yeah. It said that they were I'm looking at what they say as part of our standard operating procedure. Yeah. They just said that they were doing everything they could to remain unaffected over the short term in terms of the products that they had through air shipments.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I guess the way to maybe think about that is we don't put containers on aircraft. We put pallets on aircraft, right? Yeah,
and exactly. So you're certainly talking about, right.
Yeah, so we're probably talking about smaller components, but that's got to add a very significant, obviously it's got to be double digits of what that adds to the costs of getting components in. That trickles down, right? We already we're just working coming out of the COVID supply chain issues, right? We're probably safe to say we're out of those issues now, but now we've got this, and probably a 3-day strike didn't have the impact that a week long, right? But I think there was a statistic, as I said, they said it takes, 3 to 5 days post strike per day to catch up. Now, we probably had some slowdown on some ships and some ships sitting out in some harbors waiting to come in, and we'll have those slow down. So we'll probably come out of this pretty quickly. But I think the bigger factor to talk about, we talk about this on the show quite regularly, is so last year we had the threat of a strike on West Coast ports. Didn't have the strike. Did have a strike on the ports on the West Coast of Canada. We had a rail strike in Canada earlier this year, right? Which you might say, well, that's Canada, I'm in the U.S. Well, guess what? A big part of the oil coming to the U.S. is coming on rail cars into the U.S. from Canada, from oil sands or wherever else it might be. Then we have had threats of a handful of other slowdowns, and then we push things outside of the U.S., right? We got geopolitical issues, China, Taiwan, right, that we're watching and concerned about. We've got geopolitical issues in the Middle East. We've got the Panama Canal that was low in water and you couldn't get enough containers through for the last 18 months. That's slowly improving now. And then you've got Houthi rebels that are throwing, low-cost bombs from drones at container ships,
right,
in the Suez Canal, and you start putting this together, and we have a very different supply chain than we might have had even just pre-COVID. I'll say with that, right? And so the volatility has probably never been higher globally than what it is right now in the overall supply chain. Scott, that's a big statement I made. You're probably tied a little bit more to this than Tom or I are. Would you agree with that statement from a volatility standpoint?
I would absolutely agree with that. And I think, there's a number of manufacturers that are looking at different ways to shorten up the supply chain, which has been an issue it's not like this happened, last weekend. This has been going on for more than a decade. I think, it's so much. We certainly hear about a number of our manufacturers just within the 48 states who are like, we're opening up new warehousing or new production facilities on the West Coast because we were East Coast based and we don't want to make people wait 2 days to get copper wire or fittings or whatever it might happen to be. So, we hear that a lot. And that's going to be, again, I think that's going to be a key to some of these problems is shortening up that supply chain distance from where a product is made to where it gets delivered. It's not, like I said before, though, it's not magic. It's not going to happen in a weekend. But it is definitely something that I'm hearing from manufacturers, small and big, about trying to kind of tighten up that distance traveled because of, like you said, these crazy things that are happening. Again, the fact that there's the rebels firing bombs from drones. Nobody wants to be dealing with that. It's just crazy.
No, it's crazy. Tom, were you going to add something there? I'm sorry to jump in on that.
We talked, I think it was last week, right? We were talking, there was an article we were talking, or maybe 2 weeks ago, about the complacency that is set back in a lot of organizations about supply chain, right? Post-COVID. It's like, oh, wow, okay, we're back to quote unquote normal. It's not really an executive issue anymore, all of that. But, Scott, I think we were talking a little bit about this before we went on. I'm not sure there's ever a place where you can be complacent about your supply chain process. And you just never know, right? When it's going well, enjoy it while it lasts, because it's probably not going to be permanent. And you better have contingencies and other things on there.
I
agree. And flexibility is tough. And let's add on, tariff potentials that are going to add costs if you wanted to manufacture stuff in Mexico, which, by the way, Mexico doesn't have a lot of capacity left for manufacturing anyway, especially near the borders of Texas. Yeah. So it's innovation, I think, is going to be a key on the manufacturing side. It'll be interesting to see how they work from an electrical standpoint, how they work with their distributor partners to try and speed up supply chain issues over the next few years, because I think this is where a lot of folks are going. Nobody wants to wait 52 plus weeks for a generator. But they're still doing that. That's been going on for 4 years.
I think there's a significant factor here, though, that we should talk about a little bit. Scott, I'm really interested in what your thoughts are and what you might have heard. I've spent my entire career in distribution and manufacturing, and was a manufacturer's rep myself for about 10 years. And I just think back to the days, and this was sold the agency in 2003, I guess it was. But, it used to be, if you were a distributor, and it doesn't matter what you're distributing, but if you're a distributor, supply chain is like you got a fax from, in the old days, you got a fax. From the old days, you got a letter from a 3M or Honeywell or ABB or whoever it might be, is, in reference there is, about some issues. Then you got a fax. Hey, we're concerned about this, and we may have to adjust some pricing, or we may have some shipment delays, or order now. And then emails started with that. Well, now we're and that people waited to hear from their suppliers. And I think now we're coming into a world where we've had distributors on this show that said that they're literally in communication about supply chain issues weekly or multiple times a week with all of their key suppliers. Where, years ago it was, for the most part, things are just going to move along and we'll wait to hear from them if there's any issues. What thoughts on that, Scott?
I think that's absolutely the case. And again, technology and automation and communication has certainly provided that opportunity. So why not take advantage of it? I'm looking at copper wire these days, and there's only so much copper on the planet.
Yeah.
And China wants about 75% of it. And the United States is trying to rewire itself. So the competition is, what's available and how do I know it's available and what's the price? The price is, the price changes every minute, for crying out loud. Yep. Deliveries for copper, project out, by the quarter, I guess they're projecting out toward the first of the year today. And so there has to, I think that that's why there are procurement people working in major positions at distributors these days. That's all they do. They need to know what's out there, where it is, what the price is, how fast I can get it. And those are now major roles that are being played at distributorships, large and small, again, across the country. And regionally, like if you're a Rexel, you've got dozens of procurement people. And that's all they do, and that's really, I think, been a radical change from, like you were saying, when you were getting a fax, a few decades ago.
Yep. So what did you hear from your post yesterday in your network from the distribution side of things?
Yeah. So they were great. One of our distributors, they were, it wasn't a surprise. So they were stocking up well in advance. They said that they had at least 30 days worth of, full stock products where they really believed that they would be able to fulfill all needs and not be impacted. And that's probably about as good as you can do. I mean, there's only so much warehouse space on the planet. You know what I mean? You probably can't do much better than that. Their approach was that they were going to maintain a higher level of stock materials and move them around their multiple locations as needed at their own expense to try and meet whatever those needs were. So they were certainly, like everybody, was hoping that it wasn't going to be an extended strike, but they were certainly paying attention to it and had done some proactive work. And I kind of got, they didn't say this, but I kind of got the feeling that it was sort of one of those, look, in times of trouble, in times when you might have a hard time, sourcing products, we're gonna take as best care of you as we possibly can, and we hope that down the road you're gonna remember us whenever you need anything, whenever. So it seemed like those who strategized well felt like it was really going to have a longer term. Yes, it was going to take care of everybody short term, but that was going to kind of create the tattoo, the stamp of. We're there for you all. We're there for you 365, not just during, what potentially was a 30 or 45 day.
Yeah. So being a very short strike, probably didn't get to a place of allocations, right? Either from manufacturers to distributors to end users, right? Probably.
Yeah, and I'm wondering a little bit about unwinding. To be honest with you, again, some of the manufacturers said we're going to ship stuff to the West Coast now. Well, there's a massive expense there. Taking a boat around through the Panama Canal, which is hard enough as it is. So now they're going through some unwinding of saying, hey, how do I turn this back around again at the lowest expense that I could possibly have? So there's still a lot of play.
That's a big issue when you start sending a ship that's supposed to be going to the East Coast to the West Coast in a lot of instances. But I also saw something of interest earlier this week. Tom and I are both born and raised in Long Beach, California. In fact, funny fact, other than we've been friends forever, we were born in the same hospital. I saw an interview of the executive director, CEO, I'm not sure what his title was, of the Port of Long Beach. And the Port of Long Beach and Port of Los Angeles are just separated by a spit of man-made peninsula there that they have. But if you put those together, I think they're combined. I think they're the third busiest port in the world. But the head of the Port of Long Beach was talking about, he was being interviewed on the local news just before I left town on Tuesday or Wednesday, I guess. And he was talking about they were interviewing him about the port strike, and they talked about the implications in the port in Long Beach and or LA. And he was saying, we're seeing a slight uptick of, maybe a little bit of containers that wouldn't normally be coming here. But it was really intriguing to me, and I wish I could remember the wording, but he was alluding to the fact that their unions in the Port of Long Beach are not excited to have extra work because it's being pushed away from their brothers, right, in the Gulf Coast and the East Coast. So now you had this, and if he was willing to even go there at all and touch that topic, that there's a pretty significant factor there of, nobody being excited about unloading, at least unloading quickly, anything coming that would have been not been able to be unloaded in another spot. So that kind of got to me and made me a little bit nervous when you think about, again, the issues that go with the supply chain that we work within wholesale distribution manufacturing. So
it sounds like you should automate.
Well, I searched that a little bit this morning before we got on, and I didn't have a chance to read the articles that came up. But as we talked about the automation component of that, there was I just searched Port of Rotterdam. And one of the articles I saw was written in 2015, and it was comparing the Port of Oakland with the Port of Rotterdam and the efficiencies or inefficiencies compared to the two of those. And I'm thinking about, we've been talking about this, 2015, 9 years ago, almost 10 years ago, but it's a long time to be having not made really any progress in this country along that line. So. Yep. We'll see what's next. So I guess the big issue is what happens in January as these parties will be talking throughout the holidays, evidently, and see what we come up with. Scott, any takes on any other takes from you had mentioned manufacturers, reps, distributors, and manufacturers reach out to you. Any other key takes that you saw or anything unique that came from the feedback you got from your network?
Again, I think the last take was, again, the ability to communicate where we're at. And I think that, again, the folks who communicated with me had not just a strategy to source as many products and create and bring into this country as many products or provide for if they were distributors, provide for their customers as many products as possible. They also, you could tell, really had a specific communication plan that they were not going to let anybody guess what was going to happen.
Awesome.
And I think that's a huge, asset to any company. I mean, they obviously were like, this is what we're going to do this week and the next day and next week and however long this takes. I mean, I was really impressed by the fact that they were going to take guessing out of the equation. And that, I think, is really essential to their success.
That's awesome. And you know what? That is a great place for us to kind of jump off on this topic. I'll add a couple things at the end. Is we live in a world where we can communicate instantly, and to have any ambiguity in a supply chain discussion, there's information we don't know yet, but to look across the supply chain and not be able to communicate efficiently and transparently it's just unacceptable in this day and age. So I did with Chief Revenue Officer of NAW popped a note up that Eric Hopland from NAW is again on Fox News this morning, walking through what all of this means and what's next. So if you, Dan Schuberth posted that Maria Bartiromo on Business this morning, and about what we might be seeing next between now and January that's coming up. So, any other thoughts, Tom or Scott, on this?
No, I think we've hit it.
On the support strike and
I'm interested to see.
Well, Scott,
Kevin, you're breaking up, and is Kevin frozen for you, Scott, as well?
Yeah, he's frozen a little bit for me too.
Yeah.
So.
But I think the big thing, we'll have to see what happens in January. Mm-hmm. And I think part of that could be a function of who our administration is come January. So
no doubt. Yeah.
It'll be, at this point it's up in the air, but anyway, should play out with some interesting stuff. Mm-hmm. All right, Kevin, I think you're moving again. So maybe not.
Good.
Maybe not.
Well, Scott, thanks for being with us. So hopefully you guys can hear me. You able to hear me? Yep. Good. Scott, thanks so much. Coming with us last minute. We're going to get you on the docket to join us again soon for a full show. And I don't know if you're going to be in Chicago for any of the upcoming electrical buying group meetings in next month. But if you are, let's make sure to connect during that time.
I will be there the end of October, definitely.
Very good. Very good. Let's make sure we break some bread or spend a few minutes together.
You got it. Thanks, you guys, for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks, Scott.
Good.
Bye.
Hey, Tom, let's kind of throw the newsletter back up. Let's look at a couple articles and we'll call it a day. How's that?
Yeah, as Bob said, I think there's a solar flare here in Boulder that is making you look
apologies.
a little. Yeah. But
my apologies. So we'll just kind of just as we remember, we talk about each week, we talk about breakdown the economy and the supply chain. We spent a whole part of today's show talking about the supply chain, which I think was of real value to us. We had some info about manufacturing contracts in September, good article there from Industrial Supply. There was some good news to the economy this morning, though, Tom, with the jobs reports and unemployment. Did you get a chance to read that? How are you feeling about your stakes?
Well, I mean, it's like I said, you can't trust these statistics, I don't think. But
wait 10 minutes. Yeah,
but certainly the job report was much better than expected. They also revised prior reports to be higher than what they were significantly. Mm-hmm. I think it was 72,000 jobs. I mean, I don't know what to think, right? You've heard a lot in the last week with Powell talking about, well, we're going to look at the data. We're going to make our decisions. As Bob said, they'll just adjust the report down again next month. Yeah, exactly. I think it's like, hey, how do I turn the dial based on what I want to hear on any given, I want to hear given any week? So that's why I don't know what to think about it. But if you were to look at the data, and there is one more jobs report that comes out in November before the next Fed meeting. So, if that report is higher again, right, significantly, or if they decide it's going to go down, I think that's going to determine a lot of what's going to happen at the next Fed meeting. But yeah, I don't.
Go ahead.
Anyway, you could say there's politics behind, but again, I think this would be the last job report, possibly before the election. I think if the election's on the 5th, and I think
you're right.
There would be one more before the election, I believe.
We'll have to look that up. I don't see the jobs report substantially impacting voters at this stage of the game.
I don't think it's a job report. I just think it's quote unquote shows a healthy economy.
Yeah.
Right. Which is what it's trying to point to. So,
yep. And I think it's interesting, right, that we're, I don't know, a lot of conspiracy theory potential with some of these things and the timing of them as they come together. But we'll have to see. Watching the pundits this morning on CNBC, at least, they talked to 3 or 4 different economists, and then the opinions of their economics team that they have there was only one person said no more cuts. Everybody else said at least one more cut. this year, but 250 basis points versus 500. So we'll see what comes out of that. We'll go from there. So some good news out of the industrial distribution Big 50 list has been released. So if you are interested in seeing who the top 50 are in distribution from an overall growth standpoint, revenues, product categories, so forth, check out industrialdistribution.com. Tom, it's probably time for us to kind of wind down today, but in our e-commerce and marketing section, we've got a handful of good articles. Each week we publish the newsletter with the technology and cybersecurity and AI segment. And then we also talk about sales and M&A, and all good articles that we posted this week. I think all total, we've probably got 15 great articles in the newsletter or so this week. Yeah, no, I agree. And there's some here that I think, the solution selling one, interestingly enough, was quite good. It's really talking about, solution selling, right, as selling a solution. But as it says here, the biggest challenges we have in sales is the customer recognizing the problem, having them, the customer being able to define their problem, understand their problem, and take action about it. So it's kind of like going back in the sales process and saying, how do you create that demand that actually gets somebody to understand the problem and the opportunity that's there? So I thought this was a good article on that. I can't help you if you don't want to be helped. Yeah. Right. Or don't understand the problem. Good. There's some good tips in there on conversations and communication. And then in our people and leadership segment, we had a couple articles about generative AI, one relating to having policies within an organization, and then another one about training within an organization. So we've added that earlier this year, our people and leadership segment. So those are some good articles. So Tom, let's start our wind down for the day here. I really appreciate everybody being with us. I'm sorry about my hiccups with my solar flare, as Bob. And I think we should let everyone know we're leaving early because you're at a conference, and plus you've got to go deal with that solar flare. So, well, and I've got to get to this conference and get a flight home next week, and then 3 straight weeks on the road of 4 different buying group and trade association events in 3 weeks. So a lot of movement going on, but good times out there. Look forward to seeing a lot of industry folks over the next few weeks. So as we wind down, the quick reminder, what we reviewed today and talked about was this is probably the first time we've done this where we've spent most of the show on a single topic, but the supply chain issue is getting more and more complex all the time. So we appreciate everybody that was with us today. Certainly Scott joining us. We do this every week. We review our newsletter Around the Horn and Wholesale Distribution. If you don't get that newsletter and you would like to, feel free to reach out to us at hello@leadsmarttech.com. We'll get that out to you. We do every week. And you can also go to the website for the show, www.aroundthehornpod.com, and see past episodes there. And we'll look forward to people joining us again in the future. We thank, again, Scott. We appreciate our editor and producer of the show, John Taylor, that takes care of things each week. And obviously, we couldn't do this without the support of LeadSmart Technologies. So, Tom, that's it for me. I'll check in with you on my way to the airport later. How's that? All right. Sounds good. Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode and our guests. Each week, we try our best to dig into the topics that are impacting your business. So please reach out to us and let us know how you think we can make the show better, or topics you'd like for us to tackle or talk about more often, and even guests you'd like to see join us. We're looking forward to bringing you next week's session, and hope that until then, you stay safe, stay focused, and do great things. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast and leave a review to help others in wholesale distribution get access to the conversation. And finally, please check out our sponsor, LeadSmart Technologies, and their manufacturing and wholesale distribution industry CRM, customer intelligence, and channel collaboration platform. That's LeadSmart Technologies at leadsmarttech.com.